Psychoanalysis and philosophy, the touch of the psychic. What does the word mean? Because the word psychic is not a word of psychoanalysis. It is a word used by Sri Aurobindo in his own spiritual and psychospiritual writings. The word psychic originally is a Greek word. Ancient times, it was used to denote the soul. And Sri Aurobindo in his writings has given this name to a specific part of the human system. And this part in ancient times was known as the Jivatma or the evolving soul. So in Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, you have the idea of God existing in three stations. The transcendent God that cannot be known, and this transcendent comes into manifestation without exhausting itself. So a part of it always remains eternally transcendent, but a part of it comes into existence and takes two positions. One of the universal ground, and second of being immanent in existence. So the aspect of immanence means that God has become everything that exists. So there are three aspects of God: the transcendent, the universal, and the immanent. The transcendent is beyond human conceptualization. The universal is above evolution, but the immanent is in evolution. The immanent is in the process of becoming. The universal is the eternal ground of being, above the process of becoming. The universal as a ground at certain points individuates into what is called the central being, or in Sri Aurobindo's word, Atma. This word Sri Aurobindo uses in a way quite different from the way colloquially the word Atma is used. So the transcendent manifests part of itself as the universal, and the universal at certain points individuates without a break in eternity, continuity, or its nature. And that individualization is called as central being. That central being is still above evolution. It is not immanent. And that central being sends into the world of becoming a small part of itself called the psychic. That is how the psychic is philosophically located in Sri Aurobindo's writing. And the psychic evolves incarnation after incarnation through life and death. It collects experiences, collects the essence of evolution, carries forward things from one incarnation to another, drops things which are not useful in evolution. And the psychic in the human psychospiritual system, not only psychospiritual system, in the whole of the human system, is actually a present structural and a functional entity. It is out of our awareness. It's covered up by psychological layers of psychological material, but it is there. And it, in Sri Aurobindo's opinion, it's the most important aspect of the entire human system. Now, where is the location of the psyche? At the chest center, Sri Aurobindo talks about three important centers. One is in the front, outermost is the ego center, which in Cohesion, not Cohesion terms, but I would like to put it into Cohesion theory as the social self or the social ego. But in Sri Aurobindo's language, it is the whole of the ego in the normal sense, which is in the front. Behind it is the emotional center that normally we would call the heart center in tantric terms, the emotional center. And behind it is the psychic. So there are three things, one behind the other. There is the ego. Behind the ego is the heart center, heart chakra. Behind it is the psychic. So deep inside the center of the chest is this, but you cannot experience it on demand, on will. It's only in the course of spiritual evolution, after crossing the line, after crossing, making substantial progress, that one is able to experience it consciously. Till then, it remains something conceptual on the lines of Kohut's self or Jung's self. And all the three are very different. Those who experience it describe it as a flame of light in the sacred cave of the heart, of the size of the thumb, and the secret of all secrets. That is how its location is, and that is how it is described by those who experience. Now, what is the importance of the psychic in Sri Aurobindo's system? And then we'll come to the psychoanalytic part of it. In Sri Aurobindo's internal yoga, there are four stations which are very important. These are four, you can call it four achievements on the path. And the four are: the first attainment, first great spiritual attainment is experience of the state of no thought. Second great achievement is experience of the psychic. Third important achievement is experience of the central being and the oceanic oneness. And the fourth and the most important aspect is bringing down all the higher states of consciousness between our ordinary mind and the central being into our everyday 24/7 working, and the ultimate ideal being to institute all of them, anchor all of them permanently into the physical, the most physical of the physical. There are various ways of moving in this system of integral yoga, but the best that Sri Aurobindo and the mother talk about is to first find the psychic and then let it take over the whole process and guide us in the entire journey. Sri Aurobindo talks about the psychic as something that is far seen. Sri Aurobindo writes, it sees the unseen and plans ahead. It sees the unseen and plans ahead. So it has a very important part in the system. So it has a very important place in the whole system. The experience of it is described as something sweet, something that resembles a devotee or a bhakta, something that is of the nature of a pure child, goodness, light, soft golden warmth, of the pineapple yellow flavor, not of the strong dark yellow flavor. And the way it is experienced is for very few people, it happens that you experience the psychic and then it remains in the front or remains active forever, or it becomes the center of your existence, governing the whole of your existence. More usual experience is a very intense experience at first and then forgetting it, then occasionally experiencing it for years and years to come till the whole journey rolls out. And it takes years, at times even incarnations, we are told, before the active, aware experience of the psychic stabilizes. How do you make out if that is psychic is active in others or not? Once you experience your psychic for a reasonably long period and you have a well-developed intuition, then you develop this ability, we are told, of seeing the psychic and the psychic development of others. An interesting point here comes up. Is it possible for somebody to exist without the psychic? Usually no. 99.5 times 9, no. In rare exceptions, there are two exceptions. One, mother used to say that Stalin did not have a psychic. Then the question is, what kind of being was he? And how many different ways a human system can exist if it can exist without the psychic? We don't have answers to these questions. It's like creating a theory of everything that can wait. We don't have to solve all the questions in our generation. Leave something for the future generations also. We don't have to conclude everything, but these are interesting questions that one, you can make out the psychic in others, the level of influence of psychic in the lives of others, and those who don't have a psychic. How do you find the touch of the psychic? You find it in harmony, in goodness, in sweetness, in old Hindi film music, in devotional songs, the entire range of bhakti music. And much of Indian culture is centered around the psychic. And you can see that the touch of the psychic and this touch of the psychic optimized in the last century, in the 60s and 70s. It is where the optimization happened, and we can see art of that time, especially film music, which has a very distinct touch of the psychic. People also had a higher touch of the psychic in that period. It was kind of period of an optimization of culture in a unique sense. What is the importance of the psychic in Sri Aurobindo's opinion? In his opinion, the entire question of human history is the question of moving from a life, a mental life centered around the ego to a mental life centered around the psychic. Not in fact mental life, the whole of life. So life centered around ego to centered around psychic. This movement is one of the central movements in human history and also a goal of human history. In most cases, the influence of psychic is occasional, in many cases rare, on the frontal apparatus of the mind, and the psychic can guide only partially, and rarely somebody has a psychic centered life. So this was all about the psychic. If we look at Sri Aurobindo's model of the mind, his path of self-development, self-healing, enhancement of one's quality of life, enhancement of one's happiness and competence, the psychic has a central place into it. Now, if we were to bring the concept of the psychic into psychoanalysis, what would it come to? So the first question that comes is, has psychoanalysis missed to integrate the concept of psychic into itself? Psychoanalysis has missed many things to integrate, and one of the things is the concept of the psychic. Not only concept, the fact of the psychic as a structural and functional component, perhaps the most important concept, most important component or constituent or the fundamental governor of the system. This is not the only thing that has been missed. We have missed the positive part of superego. Talked only about the superego pathology, but we have missed the positive part of superego, which has to do with superego goodness, superego energy, superego happiness, superego leading to enhancement of goodness, thought, good thought, energy, the exhilaration of the superego, the ego strength enhancement function of the superego, the affect bearing capacity aspect of the superego, and the guilt related to not bringing superego into adequate appreciation. We also miss the mysticism, reincarnation, transpersonal, psychedelic, the mystical tools of Tantra which can help us to heal. So all of that, yes, remains to be tried out conceptually, operationally, and how far these things can be integrated with psychoanalysis. So this integration over the next 50 years will slowly happen. Some things will pass the test, something will fall by the wayside. In my own model of the mind and the healing system heat, I have tried this integration. We have discussed that before. You can see those discussions. One of the ideas here would be to have psychic experience as one of the central goals. And if this experience cannot be had, at least to understand it and have micro experiences. If not direct, then from a distance. And move to a guidance of the psychic from the guidance of the unconscious. If we were to bring the psychic in, what difference would it make to psychoanalysis? Let us say the concept and some trials pass the test. What difference would it make? We are still a long distance from seeing that, but what it appears, we can at least start the discussion. Will it make a difference? Yes and no. Yes, in the sense, new things will come in. No, in the sense, the established fundamental central elements of psychoanalysis are there to stay. They are not going anywhere. So, when it comes to yes, reincarnation, positivity, mysticism, spirituality, goodness beyond calculation, that comes in. Reality acceptance takes a completely different color and flavor because the idea of reality changes. The moment reincarnation comes in, and the moment the psychic, the soul, and the central being comes in, the idea of reality changes, and therefore reality acceptance takes a very different color and flavor. It becomes actually much easier. Reality acceptance in a spiritual framework is far easier than reality acceptance in the classical framework of psychoanalysis. The no aspect of it, what doesn't change and what remains. The central elements remain as they are. The significance of analysis, revisit, analysis, catharsis, reality acceptance, internalization of the good object, safety, articulation of desire, all these remain as they are. There is no one tool to do everything. What we are talking of is enrichment, not substitution. One change, however, which comes is the technique undergoes a change because many spiritual approaches and tools would then come in, and dream analysis also would undergo a change because now you have a new central entity, structurally and functionally speaking, in the psychic system, which is reincarnating, governing, controlling, seeing ahead, which we can't see. Therefore, the dream analysis takes a very different flavor. It becomes a much wider and holistic and spiritually driven dream analysis. One of the difficulties in this kind of discussions is what essentially should be a and situation, this and this, both enriching each other. Instead of an and situation, people get into a split position and convert it into a or situation, this or this. And that gets into a situation where you take one position and dismiss the other. Irony is, if you look at those who are in psychoanalysis and those who are in spirituality, the dismissal of the other is mutual. The dismissal is mutual, and the goal is to move from here to a position where admiration is mutual. This is the journey of development of the area of holistic view. An important question that comes up here. This psychic at the first sight can appear to some as very near to Jung's concept of the self. So are the two the same? Let's explore that. Is the psychic of your Bindu the same as the self of Jung? Answer is no. They may seem similar to some, but they are not the same. Differences are not one or two, but a whole long list of differences. Just as Jung's self is very different from Winnicott's self, is very different from Kohut's self. Similarly, Sri Aurobindo's psychic is very different from Jung's self. Let us look at the differences. The psychic tries to coordinate to the extent the outer apparatus allows, and it rarely succeeds. Comparatively, Jung's self, when it tries to coordinate the psychic events from deep within, the success rate is much higher, especially in early part of one's life. The psychic is structural, unlike Jung's self, which is more of a conceptual center, not a structural center. The psychic is positively reincarnational, unlike Jung's concept of self, where the idea of reincarnation is at best confused. Psychic is experienced in evolution. Jung's concept of self is such that the self can directly never be experienced. The psychic influences with its goodness the outer apparatus. Jung's self, in that sense, is more stoic. It is not loaded with one-sided quality of goodness. The psychic is specifically located deep inside the center of the chest, unlike Jung's self, which is not located, which is more amorphous, and in some writings, it appears to be at the center of the psychic apparatus, and in some writings, it appears to be spread out even to the outside of the ego. The psychic comes from the central being. The self doesn't come from any other source. It is the most primary source, that is itself. It doesn't come from any other source. The psychic is most developed in humans, less developed in other species. For the self, we don't have any idea about how the self would be in non-human species, or a relative comparison of development across species. Psychic undergoes the phenomena of coalescence, where two psychic can become one, or emanation. A part of psychic can go out and replicate itself, or part separation, where a part of it goes out and lives out the tendencies in some other species. These phenomena are not seen in case of the self. The psychic comes out very conspicuously when one is experiencing deeply the devotional classical music of good sonority. The self doesn't have this kind of characteristics. The psychic, in a way, is more fundamental than Jung's self. If we look at putting the two together, it would be the psychic and the karma, which would be the most fundamental elements, which would then result in creation of Jung's self, yin and yang, the collective unconscious, the personal unconscious, and the ego. That is how the creation of the structural components of the psychic system would come up if we were to integrate these two concepts. You can see this in my heat model of the mind. That is where this exactly is what is the conceptualization of the human psychic system, human psychological system. Thank you. I'm sure there will be questions. This is a completely new concept, trying to bring something in from Sri Aurobindo's writings and work and experience into psychoanalysis. It's almost like committing a heresy. Write to me if you have questions. And let us see how it develops further conceptually in terms of technique and in terms of tools. Thank you.